Ladies and gentlemen, it is time to rank. Hello, everybody. I am Tyler Fion Fire Erzberger, your residential host at the ESPN Valorant Power Ranking Show. Each and every week on Monday nights, 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern. With a guest, we come here, we pick a region, North America and Europe, and we break down our top 10 power rankings in that specific region. Coming off of a big event last weekend, we had the Allied Esports Odyssey, the latest European Ignition Series tournament. So tonight, that means we are going to be covering European Valorant, and of course, with Turkey on the rise into the Valorant scene to 50,000 plus tuning in to watch BBL Esports, I had to bring on our Turkish expert himself, Arda Ocal, my colleague, my friend, my partner in Valorant duo queues and getting beat a lot. How are you doing, buddy?
We do get beat a lot. We've
Yeah,
had
we do.
we've had some
Oh,
recent success. Let's
yeah, that's
not
some reason.
let's
Yes, you
let's
could say
pump our own
nice.
tires here.
Yeah,
Not
yeah.
bad. I mean, I'm getting out of iron hell. We're getting there
Well,
slowly but surely.
I am
But I'm
not
doing
iron.
great.
Just letting everyone know,
Yeah.
not iron. Not iron. A bit better than that, but no, it was a really fun Allied Esports tournament. Even though I do think everyone can agree that the let's pack every game onto Sunday. Let's put all the playoff games on Sunday and just run through it as quickly as possible. Maybe not the brightest idea for a format, but overall it was a good tournament.
Yeah, and honestly, it also made me that between that and the Pittsburgh Knights tournament in
Mm.
NA, the best of one playoff format made me believe and cement the fact
Mm.
that the FaZe Clan
Yes.
Invitational really sort of set the blueprint
Mm.
for how top tier tournaments should
Yeah.
be.
Yeah, best of threes up till winter final, grand final, best of five that's the way to go. I mean, obviously, best of five is a bit tricky with only 4 maps. Come on, Ryan, add a new map. We know it's coming December, but maybe make it a bit more quicker for us so we can actually have an actual best of five with 5 maps. But
Do we know where the map is going to be based? Do they give us a
no,
geographic
nope.
location?
I've tried.
May I suggest Turkey riots?
Eh,
May I
eh.
suggest a Turkish agent too? Why don't we that by the end of 2021, Tyler,
Mm-hmm.
let's hope for a Turkish agent and a Turkish-based map somewhere in Istanbul. Give us like the whole bazaar
Mm-hmm.
inside the Grand Bazaar. There you go. There's your idea, Riot. 200 IQ.
I mean, Turkey is one of the biggest regions right now in Valorant. We've seen it this past weekend that the viewership a lot of times was carried by the BBL esports crew and the Turkish fans who came out to watch their team play. But Arno, we're going to start the show not with the European power rankings, but a bit of news, a bit of gossip, a bit of tea. Last week we broke here on the ESPN Valorant Power Ranking show that Nitro was transitioning from Counter Strike Global Offensive, where he was a star IGL of the famed Team Liquid squad who won the IM Grand Slam in 2019. He was moving to Valorant. And it was, where is he going to go? Where is he going to go? Where is he going to go? A few days later, on another Valorant show, the ESPN Valorant show every Thursday night at 5 p.m. Pacific, I broke that he was in deep discussions with 100 Thieves. A few hours later, it was confirmed he goes to 100 Thieves. But that's not the entire story. That should be the happy ending, right? Right, Arda, like Nitro, him and Hiko off in 100 Thieves to go build their happy little Counter Strike roster. That should be a happy story, right?
It should be. It should be a very happy
Hmm.
story. However,
But but when you have a sweepstakes like the Nitro sweepstakes, where there was a lot of attention, a lot of people on them, a lot of really good teams looking to sign him, there can be some blowback if things don't go your way. And one of those teams that was very in on Nitro and who I believe was the front runner from Nitro when I first announced that he was going to be transitioning to Valorant was T1. T1, alongside 100 Thieves, have been one of the most aggressive teams on the market early and often. They signed the first pro player in Valorant in Brax before he even touched the game. So they've been very, very aggressive in the Valorant market, and they were very much in on Nitro. And what I believe from talking to multiple people who, been scrimming and watching and who have, an inside eye into the Valorant world, Nitro was extremely close to signing of T1. And by extremely close, I'm pretty sure a lot of those team members believed that Nitro would be joining their team and as their in-game leader, because that's the one thing T1s has always really needed. Since when they had 4 players on the roster, Brax, Food, Crashies, AZK, the one thing they said they needed in interviews was an IGL, because they are 4 pretty introverted, quiet people. Instead, they picked Skadoodle, who was the best player available on the market. 100 Thieves also going after Skadoodle, T1 getting Skadoodle, and they had no IGL. Kevin, AZK kind of stepped into that role, and it hasn't had the same effect or the impact they probably would have wanted. So when Nitro's up on the board, he's saying I want to come to Valorant. Seems like a perfect fit on T1, right?
I mean, there's a lot of layers to this story, right? Like there's
Yes,
so many layers,
so many
like you
layers.
said. Oh my gosh. So the one angle I want to look at here is that the in-game leader role, as we know, is very, very important. Shinobi's a
Yeah.
great in-game leader with C9, for example. His role is very defined, and he really brings that team a lot of success. TSM is another great example. So Broza just assumed the in-game leader position, and you saw the dividends that it paid there with TSM and how now they're able to bounce back and reverse course, particularly against Sentinels in recent tournaments after they have suffered setbacks. So that role is very, very important, and it takes a certain kind of person to be able to execute that because, as Shinobi has told me, it's not just about playing the game. In fact, he said that 30% of the time he's looking at the radar, he's looking at the mini map to try and organize his team for certain plays and retakes, etc. So there's definitely a whole new skill set there. And someone like Nitro, like you said, has so much experience as the IGL that's going to instantly improve 100 Thieves' positioning and standing. And also, he has a lot of history with Hiko.
Yeah.
They know each other very, very well. And whether or not there was any sort of animosity there, we know the team was toxic. Jacob reported it. Whether the two of them, it sounds like they get along great now, at least by what they're posting on Twitter. So maybe there wasn't much back in the day. The team was definitely a toxic team outwardly anyway, and what we've heard from Jacob internally. But this is huge. And now with T1 and Skadoodle, here's the thing, like when you hear that you got to improve your agent pool, when you hear or when you see the DMs that are going around from your teammates talking about you a certain way, is that relationship repairable at this point? Are you going to want to come back to this team unless you have a heart-to-heart conversation with them?
It's tough. So continuing on the story so T1 very much in the Nitro sweepstakes. They think they're getting close to signing Nitro, and the thing is, Hiko and Nitro have that beef, that believed beef, from people talking to them from the past teams they've been on. The thing that didn't have beef was T1 and Nitro. Brax and Nitro were very close friends. Nitro, like Nick Fury in the Avengers, right when Nitro announced that he was leaving Counter-Strike, Brax was in that thread saying, "Welcome home. We have some room. We have some room for you in Valorant." So Brax and Nitro are such close friends, and it really thought it would be those two kind of manning up, the future of the T1 roster. But when it came down to it, 100 Thieves paid a lot of money to get Nitro. So Nitro, who looked like he was going to go T1, girded and went over to 100T, and T1 was expecting to sign Nitro. So from people I've talked to, Ska was already told that he was going to be benched in favor of Nitro. He was okay with it. He wasn't kicked off the team. It was more of, hey, let's improve your agent pool. We still believe in you. You've been, you haven't had the best results recently. You've been playing Sage and Sova in a meta where almost every single North American team needs to have an aggressive jet on the operator. And it was much more of like, hey, take some time off, get your things together. We've invested a lot in Skadoodle. We're not just going to give up on the guy. But what happened is, hey, Nitro goes over here, goes under Thieves. Ska is still in this awkward position where he's like, okay, I guess I have to learn more agents, have to get better on Jet. And now they're still left with the biggest hole is they have no IGL. And, AZK, what you said about Shinobi is so perfect, right? Where you want AZK to be focused perfectly on the game itself. You don't want him to have to be calling out and having 30% of his attention pulled away from actually getting fracked, because in just pure mechanics, he's one of the better players we have in North America. So for T1, they still are looking for that IGL, where if bringing Scoodle back into the fold isn't really going to fix that option, right? Where I've heard they've been trialing a few new players out to see if they can get that, fifth player. They obviously played a fraud, someone you've talked to extensively on your Coach's Corner show in the recent Pittsburgh Knights Gauntlet series, and he actually did quite well, which is actually the funniest thing possible. Is T1 did pretty poor throughout that tournament, not even making it out of the group stages. But Fraud was statistically one of the best players in the entire tournament, popping off on Jet.
And not only that, one of the things that I gleaned from the interview, and it's available on YouTube right now, you can watch it for yourself, is that I don't think he's done playing, or I don't think the passion is gone. And that's just a read on the way that he answered questions, saying things like, I'll scrim with the team as much as possible. Those are things that you don't necessarily hear coaches say. Coaches usually stay on the sidelines and observe and watch VODs and help their players improve in certain areas. Fraud is at the very least, hands-on coach, wants to scrim, get in there, and maybe help his team that way. But what I gleaned the most, Tyler, was that I bet you he was very happy this weekend and probably very proud of himself, as he should be. He played very well, but he was probably very happy to be playing with T1 in a competitive tournament.
Yeah, he did quite well for himself. But I think the thing with T1, and I've talked to a few pro players in the North American scene who've played against T1, scrimmed against T1, and the general consensus is they are a very good team. Like, for almost every single tournament they enter, I get feedback from players saying, yeah, it's usually them, TSM, Sentinels. Those are the three teams to look at. The two things that a lot of teams tell me are, A, they're too passive. They're far too passive when it comes to, making very quick executes on attack or defense, which comes down to the IGL. And secondly, I've had a few people tell me that they don't feel like Skadoodle is a scary operator to play against. When they talk about Tens, when they talk about Shazam, when they talk about Wardell, there's a fear of playing against those players. There's a fear of that jet play, that aggressive operator play. And when I talk to a few players, they say Skadoodle is a legend. He's a legend, no doubt. He's a former Counter-Strike world champion. He is forever going to be one of the most legendary American esports players of all time. But when it comes to Valorant so far, he hasn't had that he hasn't drawn any fear into anyone. And I think that's a lot of what T1's looking at is like, hey, we don't want to throw you in here and keep trying to like ram our head against a brick wall. Let's, bring you back, have you practice, rim hard, grind hard. From all accounts from a few days ago, it still feels like Skadoodle's on the roster. They want him to work out, but it's just this glaring hole of an IGL of this leader, and to like let AZK go back to being what he does best. And until they can find that IGL that really brings the team together, I don't know how far T1 can go. Because on paper, mechanically, we've said this time and time again, they're one of the best teams in North America. I think Brax on Cypher is I think that was actually a quite smart decision by the roster, where they switch Crashies and Brax, where I think Brax in the lurker role really keys in on what he's best at, is when he's playing a cerebral style, where he was good on Raze, he's good on Phoenix, but he was always the best on Omen statistically, and he looked the best when he was playing Omen. I think him playing Cypher, where he can play more of that lurker role, play some mind games, play more of a laid-back style where he can, kind of use his brain to outsmart his opponents, is where he fits. But for T1, and I think we can talk about this all day long, we'll talk more about it on the Thursday show, is that can they fund an IGL? Because even if Skadoodle, becomes an amazing jet player, and I don't think anyone would be surprised if he does become that amazing jet player who's up there with Wardell and Tens, they are still lacking that big voice on the team. And until they have that big voice who can rally around the troops in game, it's going to be very difficult for them to overcome the likes of TSM and Sentinel.
Well, one thing we know for sure is that Nitro's not on T1, so they didn't get the in-game leader they were gunning for.
Maybe we'll see some more pros leave. I mean, I know Student 2K has been playing a lot of Valorant. And a lot of Counter-Strike pros are playing a lot of Valorant.
Breaking news.
No. Student 2K seems quite happy on Team Liquid. But I also said about Nitro a few weeks ago, so who knows? But for the time being, they're trialing players. None of them are, tier 1 CSGO pros who are still playing. But
you know what's going to happen, right? They're going to sign the best Valorant communicator out there, T1 Myth.
Oh,
Coach Smith off TSM over to T1. IGL, book it.
That would actually probably cripple TSM's finances quite a bit to bring over Myth. Coach Smith is undefeated. He is 2-0. He has not lost since donning that persona. His co-streams are great, by the way. We'll talk about more about Myth this coming Thursday on our general Valorant show. But we have to get to the power rankings, Arda. The crux, the meat, the core of our show is these power rankings. Our top 10s, breaking down our top 5s. Are you ready?
I am.
So Europe just had the Allied Esports Odyssey. Me and Arda went to the lab. Neither of us know where we ranked our respective teams. We were going to go from 5 to 1. I will give my 5. Arda will give his 5, and we'll go down to our number 1. Number 1 probably isn't going to be a big surprise. I think a team that wins back-to-back championships probably deserves that number 1 spot. But with Arda, you never know. He might have put BBL Esports number 1.
Congratulations to my fellow Turks. BBL number 1 in the world, baby. Woo!
In terms of viewership, possibly.
Yeah.
Well, let's start off. Let's start off with an easy pick for me. Number 5. They weren't in the Allied Esports Odyssey. They lost in the qualifiers. But for me, Bonk comes in number 5. They came in second in the previous Ignition Series tournament, losing to G2 in the finals. One of the many teams who've lost G2 in the Ignition Series final. But Bonk comes in number 5, and I think they're a solid team. And for me, Bonk is. I want to see where they go because I'm a bit wary. I'm a bit scared, Arda, because it seems like every time we put, a 4 or 5th amateur team on the list and we talk about, hey, wouldn't it be great if this team gets picked up? Wouldn't it be awesome if these 5 players, their coach, they all stick together and they achieve the dream of dreams and get signed by a Fnatic or, a Mad Lions or a Rogue? How awesome would that be? And we talk about, Scythe and all these guys, and there's so much promise in them. And it's all Swedish roster. Maybe Fnatic could pick them up like the Counter-Strike days. And then you know what usually happens, Arda? Usually they don't find a team. Real life comes in the way. Some of them are working, day jobs that they have to get to. They have to quit or fall back from their Valorant dreams. 1 or 2 of them are picked up by a bigger organization down the line, and the dream crumbles. And for Bonk, we're in that position where I want them to succeed. I want this team to continue to grow with a few other amateur teams in the scene and get picked up as a 5-sack. But after watching Party Parrots and Fabricant both get kind of picked apart, kind of dismantled, I don't know if I have that optimism that I would like to have with Bonk. But for me, right now, even though they didn't make the Allied Esports Odyssey, I still have them in my number 5 spot.
I agree. I also had them at my number 5 spot, but I actually labored. This was the toughest decision that I had, honestly. Number 5 and number 6. So I'm going a little bit. I'm giving you a little bit of a precursor of what we're going to talk about from 6 to 10, but I feel comfortable telling you why here. My number 5 is Bonk. My number 6 is BBL. And yes, I am of Turkish descent. Yes, I am currently wearing a Turkish soccer jersey. Yes, I'm very proud to be Turkish. My heritage is very important to me. However, I couldn't, at the end of the day, in good faith, based objectively looking at these 2 teams, put BBL ahead of Bonk. I will say that they're close. BBL did defeat, and you talked about how Bonk was not in the Allied Esports Odyssey. Nope. That was because BBL defeated them in the final qualifying day in order to qualify for the tournament. BBL didn't have the best tournament. They were able to scrap out a victory in the group stage. It didn't go so well for them otherwise. Here's the thing, though. What I worry about with Bonk is that they've made some changes recently, particularly in the coaching role. We actually talked with their former coach, Salah, who was at the time the coach and literally 2 or 3 days later got relieved of his duties in place of Emil. So I wonder what that's going to do for the team. And the one thing he did mention was they have had some conversations, Bonk have, with major orgs. They're actually signed with Evolved Talent, who is a major esports agency, which is very rare, actually, because you really didn't see that with Party Parrots or Fabrican. But this team, Bonk, actually have a esports agency behind them that are actively looking for organizations for them to sign with. And yes, you're right, Tyler. A precedent has been set that could very well be dangerous with the Frankenstein merging of Party Parrots and Fabrican, right? So you got to wonder where that's going to happen with Bonk. I look at Yassine on this roster, and I really think he's a charismatic guy. I think that if you're looking for that star potential, he definitely has it. He doesn't have the follower base yet, but he's a guy you could definitely build around, and he's a really good player at this game. The numbers speak for themselves. He's often top fragger in many lobbies that he's a part of. So, but based on their past performance before qualifying for the Allied Esports Odyssey, making it to the finals of the Mandatory Cup, and BBL being on the come up, they are close to me, and I think that a couple more good showings from BBL, including maybe another victory against Bonk, would definitely cement them in the top 5. But for right now, Tyler, Bonk number 5 for me as well.
Yeah, I mean, we do agree on this, and I think Emil coming over from Fabrican, the other, the past Swedish amateur team that was picking up all the headlines of will they get signed? Will they get signed? And then 3 of them do. They go to FPX, who we'll talk about a bit later. But I also want to touch a bit on BBL, where yes, they are this up and coming team. They've only been playing together for a few weeks, I believe. Some of them do have those day jobs, right? Where when you have a day job where you cannot commit to the game 24/7, and you are playing against the G2s and Team Liquids and FPXs of the world, who are being signed by these mega organizations with infrastructure behind them, and they can play this game 24/7. Very impressive of BBL. They beat Bonk. They played really closely with G2 and a few of the other teams in the group stages. They beat Giants, who are also a solid team in their own right. BBL is a team that we should keep our eye on, not just because of how good they are, but because of how fanatical the fans are. And if an organization can get that Turkish audience, and you know this very well, Arda, if they can get that Turkish audience and they can brand it and they can bring those fans to that org, it could be money. A lot of money.
I'm telling you, there is no more pound for pound passionate. Maybe Brazil definitely
Brazil.
falls in there too, but Turkey, you put any fandom of any sort of competition up against any other country and they stack up. They are just insanely proud. And it's not just teams of Turks. You take a player like CNED, okay? Let's just hypothetical here, Tyler. Let's say you take CNED, who, by the way, and I know that we talked about this on Thursday and you definitely disagree with this, but I'm just going to bring it up in case the audience hasn't heard this. If you watch the interview with Salah, who was at the time the coach of Bonk that I did, he also said that if you were to put Wardell and CNED 1v1 in a jet op battle, these are Salah's words, not ours, CNED would win 20 times out of 20. Like, that's how confident he is in CNED's abilities. He also said that BBL needs a lot of structure. They need like a top org to believe in them, because he does believe that the ceiling is very high for that team, but they need structure. But if you were to take CNED and put him on, let's say, a Fnatic roster and build right, and take bits and pieces from exactly like you said, the Turkish audience would still follow CNED, even if it is non-Turks for the rest of the roster. Doesn't matter. That one Turkish player will carry the entire Turkish audience, which is something to consider for European orgs.
Let's go to my number 4, a team that I think we've been a bit down on in former European power rankings before this one, a few other of the rankings where we've been a bit harsh on them. I want to talk some good things though about my number 4 pick. Ninjas Pajamas, the perennial 3rd and 4th team, often the 3rd team, the 4th team out, not making a ton of finals, but they're always there. They're perennially always in the top 4. They're always making playoff after playoff after playoff. And I really zeroed in on this one. I really wanted to watch Ninjas Pajamas and find what made them tick and what made them good. And I've said this for quite a long while since our early shows in the Valorant scene, is that Lucker has always caught my eye in a region where the operator role isn't the end all be all. Where in North America you have to have at least 1 or 2 godly operators, or you're not going far. Where in Europe you do have the artists and your Mixwells and your Shaos and these top operator players, but teams can get by without having that ace operator. And we saw that with Team Liquid for quite a while, where they didn't have that standard primary operator player, and they were still doing well. But for Europe, I really do think Lucker is one of the most aggressive and one of the better operator players in the entire region, maybe in the entire world. In terms of first bloods, he led the tournament in the group stages, where it felt like every single round he was taking those 50-50s that we've seen Wardell take so many times in North America, and he's winning them. Where Wardell intends to win those fights, so does Lucker. Where him on the Jet frees up his team so much when he gets that early pick, and he was getting it over and over and over again. And this team is so aggressive. And if you look at Korea, their Omen player, he is probably one of my he is my favorite Omen player to watch right now. He is so aggressive with that Omen, where he is teleporting right in front of players where they know he's coming, but they're like, there's no way Korea is actually going to go for them. Like, statistically, theoretically, there's no way this player should just teleport right in front of me or right behind me. But he goes for these really aggressive teleports and these really aggressive plays. And sometimes they don't work out. Sometimes they do catch onto his over aggression, but a lot of times he goes for it and he makes these highlight plays that we've seen on Twitter and Reddit over and over. And finally, on Ninjas in Pajamas, Lucker is their ace, and I think Korea is one of the better Omens in the world. My favorite Omen to watch currently, and I think the player that gets criticized the most on this roster, and we've talked about before, is him. Hip, the former Overwatch League star of the Paris Eternal, long career in Overwatch, is, Overwatch players have been memed a lot, and we've seen throughout the months that Overwatch players are actually quite good at the game. Some of them are the best players on their respective teams. Sinatra, in particular, Shazam calling him the best player in the world a few weeks ago. And for Hip, I've always been critical of his love of arena. He loves the arena. He loves playing on it, and he doesn't pop off on it. He gets 15 kills. He gets 16 kills. And on arena, you want that hard carry 25 plus kill game to really make her work without the rest of the utility she has in her kit. This tournament, he backed away from Arena. He played primarily Raze and Phoenix. I really loved his Raze play, especially on Bud. He had some really, really highlight reel plays on that map with his Raze where he looked really proficient and clean on Raze. So I don't think Hip has to, holster the Arena forever. I think he can bring her out because obviously she is one of his favorite agents from how much he's played her. But I think that's a special pocket pick you want to keep in your holster for special occasions, where I think him on Phoenix and Raze is a lot more profitable in the long run. So for me, Ninja's Pajamas, aggressive team, a fun team to watch, especially if Korea with his Omen. I don't. I do think there's a bit of a gap between them and the top three in the European hierarchy currently, but I don't think it's something insurmountable. This team definitely has talent around it, and I think if Hip plays more of that Raze and they keep going and playing this aggressive style, and Lucker keeps improving because Lucker has that talent. I know we talk about CNET, we know we talk about these up and coming players, but I think Lucker really needs to get more looks from teams and analysts because I think he's really really talented. So NIP number 4, as they usually finish in tournaments, but being a top 4 team is not bad, and with a big orb behind them, I do see a bright future with NIP.
Same. I had Nip at
Oh,
4 as well.
yes.
I think our top 5 is going to be very, very similar, which you could guess. I mean, the big thing here is that NIP lost to both FPX and Team Liquid in this tournament, so it was very easy just optically to be able to order these teams in that fashion. The one thing I will say is that, to your point about the duelists that Hip is playing, he is a 1.06 KD with Raze, a 1.31 on Phoenix, excellent, a 1.01 on Reyna, so he's still at least above a 1 with an average combat score of 208. The one time he did play Reyna was that lower round 1 matchup against FPX where they lost to FPX 13-4 in Haven, and he was bottom frag in that game. And if you're going to play Reyna, much like how Tyler and I often flame Reyna players when we're playing Valorant,
yes.
if you're going to play Reyna, you better be ready to frag out with Reyna. Otherwise, it's not going to be a good day for you. So that is a little bit concerning there, in the sense of using Reyna and getting bottom frag, especially in a best of 1 situation. But I agree. I thought that his play on Raze and Phoenix was spectacular, and there's definitely potential here. But with that said, there definitely is still a gap. Much like there's a gap between G2 and the rest of Europe still that exists, the gap between the top 3 as a unit and the rest of Europe is also a sizable leap.
Yes, and let's go to my number 3. Maybe we disagree on this one. It's up in the air. I think number 2 and 3, we know who the teams are. We don't know exactly where they place. For me, number 3 is the newest kids on the block. Fun plus Phoenix. Fly, Phoenix, fly. The European super team created to destroy G2 and Carlos. Did not destroy them in their first event, but they came pretty dang close. And when I first saw this roster way back when Halo Thoughts really broke this news, give him full credit on breaking that, I knew they were creating a super team. Did not know it was going to be FPX. Was very surprised by that. And when I saw the roster, I was like, this is scary. If all of these pieces work together in tandem, if Angel can be the in-game leader and bring that experience, those 10 plus years in CSGO on Hellraisers, and if he can bring that experience onto this roster and kind of mold these young talents like Xiao and Zypon and make those two the scariest duo in Europe alongside, Artis and Mixwell, this could be something really special. And I think we saw that during this tournament where at times they destroyed people. They were 13-0ing teams when they were on fire, when they got that little bit of light behind them. Saipan is, he is very similar to Tens, where in almost every tournament he's leading that in that average combat score. He is leading in the kills. He's leading the first bloods. Like, the team was called Saipan Go Kill in their qualifier rounds before they officially announced they were called FPX. They know their win condition. It's a lot of times that entry fragger, the star ace entry fragger in Saipan. And the thing that I really kind of dialed in on with FPX as the tournament went along is that for a lot of the early part of the tournament, they were using Shadow, their Breach main, one of the better Breach players in Europe, as their operator, their primary operator. And he was fine. He was decent. And I said this before, where Europe isn't that beholden to the operator meta, where, yes, you need players who can play that long range sniper, but it's not like NA where you have 5 players who are all playing the op, and it's just op battles, op autos, op battles, op battles. And it can be a bit tedious in NA, where it's just a lot of people peeking at each other to see if who can get the kill first. But for me, Shadow was just decent. And I was so happy to see Shao, their Russian superstar, kind of start playing that operator game, because he played that a lot early on in the official release of the game on party pairs. He kind of switched off it with Dinksa kind of taking over the primary operator role. He played more of the rifler, but I really do like seeing Shout on that operator. He's so good on it. And I do think if there's that future of Saipan as your entry rifler, the best entry rifler in Europe, I'm sure Scream is gonna, we're gonna talk about Scream in a bit, but I'm sure a lot of people are saying Scream. Scream is obviously the best entry in the game, but I think Saipan is still number 1 currently. And if you pair that with the experience of Angel, and then you have Shao, who's so good on the operator when he wants to play that, that's a scary combination. So, and with Meadow and Shadow kind of bringing that experience they have with Saipan and knowing how to play around Saipan, because he's a kind of player that usually does need to support his aggression, I think this has the makings of a championship team. It didn't come here, but I do think, along with Team Liquid, that they are very close to maybe pushing G2 out of their comfort zone. And before you can topple G2, you have to push them out of their comfort zone. So far, we haven't done it yet, but I think FPX is close.
We differ. I thought we were going to have a top 5. This is great.
Oh, yeah.
This is great.
Yeah.
We
We
differ.
differ.
I have the teams flipped, and it was by the slimmest of margins, actually. You could really say 2A and 2B here based on past results, but I'm going based on how they have performed since they have been in that banner, and FPX obviously being the runner-up of the Allied Esports Odyssey, and also the fact that they were able to defeat Team Liquid, even though it was a best of 1, even though it was very close. It was 13-11. It's almost like that would be a throwaway game from that sense. But in the separation of power rankings, that's why I had Team Liquid at 3 and FPX at 2. So I guess, why don't I just continue my thought on FPX, since you had been talking about them, and then we can talk about Team Liquid, where you have them at number 2, I'm assuming. The one thing that I noticed from FPX that I feel like would be a problem is, especially against G2, a lot of lazy peaks. A lot of lazy peaks. I felt like they were not checking their corners thoroughly enough. They were just walking through, assuming that G2 wasn't there. And guess what? G2 were there. And they got caught off guard so many times, peeking around corners, or even just thinking they would win those peak wars. And G2, like Artist, was tagging them off at a distance, for example. So that's one thing that I thought was very, very scary. And also, G2 on attack against FPX was lights out. So that was also, to me, something that I was like, okay, the gap is definitely large here. But with that said, when you have Saipan, who is basically leading all statistics in Europe, and you have Shao, who is one of those players, like you said, who is just a tremendous, tremendous talent, I feel like those are just enough, but by a hair, and I mean the thinnest of margins, to edge out number 2 for FPX at this point in time. And definitely the recency bias of having that dub in the column against TL, even though it was a 13-11 best of 1. I totally get it. But for those reasons, and this can change in an instant in the next tournament. So, but that's why I have it the way I do right now.
So let's talk about number 2. You're number 3. I have Team Liquid as number 2, and I had such a 180 on this team from the last power rankings we did, where I still had them number 2 just because of the lack of competition in Europe, but I was very wary of them, where it's like, if FPX comes together, if Bonks has another strong tournament, I was very ready to just dunk them down the rankings, where I was like, man, I know primary operator isn't the most needed role in Europe, but I don't trust Eccles in that primary role. Like, he's the in-game leader. Do you want to have him have that much attention? Because he's already thinking about call-outs and smokes, and then you have to put him in the operator role. And, Scream, he's so aggressive, and he always wants to take that 50-50 aim duel because he's the best headshot machine in the world, possibly, when it comes to this game, where he's had games where he's had 75% headshot accuracy, which is just silly, which is just not even real, but it somehow is. And I was just like, does this team even fit together? Where you watch their comms, because Scream does, he does stream these games, where it's one of the great things about Europe still, where in NA, a lot of the top teams don't stream anymore during the big tournaments, where in Europe, Mixwell, Artist, Scream, a lot of these guys still stream their comms. And one of the things if Team Liquid from the past, it felt like it was 4 Fish 1-2-3 players, and it felt like Scream was that fifth person, where a lot of times it was go Scream kill, and if there was a lot of times where Scream was apologizing because he was playing too aggressive, or he was caught out of position, or he wasn't on the same page as everyone else. And with this tournament, I had such a turnaround on Team Liquid. I want to give a big, shout out to Sliggy, their coach, and Eccles, who really brought this team together. Where, yeah, Scream still does feel sometimes like that fifth person in a four person group, where he is that, it's 4+1, where he is just going crazy, and he kind of feels like he is not truly in the mix, but it is getting better. And I do think they have been better about playing around his aggression. And we talked about Reyna a bit earlier, where if you're going to play Reyna, you better put up those 25 kill games. And maybe probably the game that people remember most from this tournament is not G2 winning, but it is that series versus G2 and Team Liquid, the first time they ever play together, these two League of Legends rivals who've been rivals in various games. And G2 stomps Team Liquid in game one. G2 goes on Twitter, the G2 social media team, as usual, on fire, calling, trashing everyone. They trash Scream, saying he's invisible, just like Reyna. Where is he? He's not doing anything. And in game two, Scream just pops off with 31 kills. And Scream says, "You gonna talk to me? Are you really gonna talk trash to me, Mr. Headshot Machine? I'm gonna put you in the dirt if you come at me." And that was such an awesome game. And if you haven't seen that game, please go look at it. I think Scream uploaded the highlights of that game on his YouTube channel, and it's such an awesome performance from him. And it's like, when Scream is like this, it's so hard to play against him. And I've talked to a lot of pros, and Scream is a pretty polarizing figure, where some people think he's one of the best players in the world, and others think he is a drawback and sometimes an anchor to a team, because he plays so aggressive and he wants to do those 50-50 aim duels all the time. But on a agent like Reyna, if there was one player in the world to play Reyna, it was created for Scream. And when Team Liquid is rallied behind that Reyna with Scream, and you have Link, who I also want to give a big shout out to for becoming pretty much the de facto primary operator player. Eccles did play some op during the tournament as well, but it felt like Link was that primary operator on that stage a lot of time in the tournament, in the back lines, while Reyna is going crazy in the front lines. And it worked so well together. It felt cohesive. Where in the previous tournament, when these guys played together, it felt like kind of a mess, and it kind of felt they were still trying to find their feet under them. But even though they lost in the group stage, in the playoff stages, which was kind of, I'm not going to hold it against them too much, because the playoff system was quite, jank. It was best of ones. Come on now.
Yeah, no
Best
thanks.
of one. Yeah,
No thanks.
that's silly.
Especially in Valorant, where it's
Yeah.
like a map. Like, come on.
Yeah.
Some teams are not good on certain maps, or they
Yeah.
have lower percentages. Like best of ones, that
Yeah.
hurts. Feels bad, man. Feels bad.
And that's why I don't want to hold it against them. Where, like, I'm just looking at their group stage performance, and I look at some of those games. And I look at the Scream 31 kill game, and I'm like, if Team Liquid could just get one, if Team Liquid plays like that game against any team in the world, NA, Japan, Korea, China, Latin America, Brazil, doesn't really matter. They will win, because they have that X factor when they are rallied behind Scream, and when Scream is feeling it, when Scream is hot, when Scream is in that momentum, he's in the zone. When Scream is in the headshot zone, they are almost unbeatable. And while that doesn't happen every game, and I still think they're working on that complete cohesion, where it does feel like Scream is part of the team entirely, it's coming. And from last Power Rankings for 2 weeks ago, where I was like very sheepish on the team, where I'm like, oh man, I want to like these guys a lot. I like them as Fish 1-2-3. Maybe Artist leaving was such a big hole that they can't fix it. Maybe Scream is not that right fit. I am now fully behind them. And I think man, if they can catch that fire in that bottle that they did in some of those games and some of those series during the tournament, they can push G2. Not only push them, I think they can beat G2. And for G2, they are so thankful that they finally have a rival in their own region that they can trash talk with. Because Carlos, for the last month or two, has just been trash talking T1, TSM Sentinels. Finally, with FPX and T1 or in FPX and TL, I think he finally has some rivals where he can finally trash talk and have some good old-fashioned European rivalry.
Yeah. And by the way, speaking of Team Liquid, I will also say this. Yes, FPX did get victories, and we have to mention, obviously, the extraneous circumstances, the tragedy that struck in that. So, like, I don't want to take anything away from FPX's victory. They definitely looked like they were on the way to victory anyway. However, that is definitely something you have to mention, the tragedy with David P's father and him coming back to the tournament. We'll talk about G2 in a second. What I will say, though, is in particular, Team Liquid to me looked like a team that could threaten G2 the most moving forward. They look to me like the team that if there's going to be one team or the first team to unseat G2 in a tournament, I would point towards Team Liquid in Valorant sooner than I would FPX. And honestly, the match that they lost in the upper final, they lost on split, and G2 was on defense first. And by the way, like, defense wins 90 million% of the time on split, okay? And Team Liquid get 3 attack rounds. So now they're at a disadvantage going into the second half. And they get 4 wins in a row, so they win the 2 pistol rounds or whatever, the first pistol round and then the no gun round. And then when we get into the actual business end of things, they win 2 more rounds. So they were looking in a good trajectory. It's just you're already at such a disadvantage when you're playing split in a best of 1, people. So yeah, Team Liquid looked good to me. They really did. They really did.
Yeah, best of 1s, please get them out of here. Best of 1s are fine for group stages if you want to really do it, if it's a truncated system, but they had so many days where it was just group stage games, and then you put everything at the tail end on a Sunday. It could have been so good, Arda. And I think it was fun. I do think we should shout Allied Esports for a very fun tournament.
Yes.
But it was so close to being that FaZe Clan, right? Where the FaZe Clan tournament really kind of turned everything up a notch for NA, where it really turned NA from like a 5 to a 10, where everything got exciting. It was such a well story tournament. You had twists and turns. You had Coach Myth, you had Sentinels and TSM talking trash back and forth, and it culminated in this really fun final, which had a lot of room to breathe, a best of 5 final on Sunday, where on this tournament, it felt like everything was so mushed together, you really didn't have time to really focus in on a true storyline.
The group stage was fantastic.
Yeah.
If it was best of 3, I think that's the only thing that I would change and not put it all on the same day, like you said. Yeah. Best of 3 playoffs, maybe this would have shaken down differently.
Oh, yeah, if it's best of 3 playoffs, I think Team Liquid has a very good chance of not only making the finals, I think it would have been a very close series versus G2, because I just think they look so good on some of those maps, and it really does excite me about the future of Team Liquid. But as we've done every single European power rankings, we try to play, we try to be coy, we try to, build up the excitement, but the back-to-back-to-back-to-back IG Series champions are number 1, my number 1, Arda's number 1, Carlos's number 1, Mixwell's number 1, chat's number 1, every single person's number 1. I think even Team Liquid's families would have to put this team number 1 for right now. G2 Esports, our number 1, our mutual number 1 team in the European region for this week, as it has been for the previous 2 beforehand. And I really can't say much about G2, and this is nothing against them. And I just want to again shout out David P, who played through so much adversity. As someone who's lost parents in his life and has lost a lot of family members, it's really, really hard to move on from that and to play and then to do that in the honor of his father. Just amazing job by him. And he's one of the nicest and best players in Europe, and just really hearts out to the guy. He's a really amazing dude. But for G2, there's really nothing new to talk about, because me and Art have talked about this. Me and Emily have talked about it. I think everyone who's watched G2 has seen this. Is they're not pushed out of their comfort zone. Oh, hey, David P is going to play Sage. Patek's going to play Omen. Oh, Mixwell's on the Jet. Oh, we have Pith on the Cypher. And then it's Artist on the Sova, unless it's split. And if it's split, he plays the Raze. Every single game. Every single game. Where every other team is, oh, Reyna or Sage or Phoenix or, oh, was he going to play any other agent where it's like some teams have players will play 5 different agents and they have to play different compositions on different maps in different situations. G2 just outmuscles, outpowers, outskills, and a lot of times outthinks other teams. Where I love that you brought up the point of FPX not checking corners, because that's such a thing I saw a lot in the tournament, was not checking the simple corner, rushing out of showers and just not checking that looking at the top of the box. Just look at the top of the box. There were so many times in the tournament on the most pedestrian spot where from iron onward. You see that in Iron 1 play where it's just, oh, hey, I'm the Omen. I'm going to teleport to the top of the box outside of showers. And they rush in. They don't use any of their utility, and they get all gunned down because they don't check the corner of the Omen. And I think with G2, they haven't been pushed enough where they have to think outside the box. Where it's we saw Mixwell play one game of Raze, I believe. It was only one, but when they started losing a bit in the group stages, they mixed up a bit. But for the most part, this team plays the same composition every single map. You aren't going to get surprised by anything they pick. Everything is very regiment. And FPX and TL gave their best shots, and neither of them could take a map off them on Sunday. And what did G2 do? They played the same style as usual, the same free-flowing style with the same agents on the same maps, and they won again. And it's back to back to back to back. I want to just give kudos to G2 because really, why show new cards if you don't have to? Why? I'm sure they have different cards. I'm sure they can play different agents. These guys are all incredibly skilled players, but unless someone can really push you and kind of make you change your deck and make you change how you're playing, why do it? Why do it when people are rush out of showers and not check the corners, and you're just mechanically better than them and you just have better chemistry than them? There's no reason to change your style up or change your composition. So for right now, G2 is a level above FPX and TL. I just hope the next Ignition Series tournament that comes around, we can finally see them push enough to change up their playstyle, change up the agent composition, because I know G2 can do it. They just have to be pushed out of their comfort zone. And for right now, no one's doing that.
Yeah, I will. The two things I want to add, because I wholeheartedly agree with everything you said there. I loved G2's pistol rounds in this tournament. I thought that they were just lights out, especially against Team Liquid. Pith with the 4K on split B mid. I mean, come on. Like, that just shows you the pedigree. Like, to me, I guess that gives me a glimpse of, like, that's the kind of thing that you bring to the EU versus NA conversation, like where you're like, they're just completely dummying fools on the pistol rounds, for example. That's a great thing. The other thing is, I did like the statistics of Mixwell in group stage versus playoffs, in particular when they're backs. He came alive. Godwell was activated when it was elimination games, right? Like in the group stage, he was okay. Like numbers wise, 215 ACS, decent. Zypan was a 282. Right? He was a 1.02 KD. Lucker for NIP was 1.29. Scream was 1.47. Link was 1.62. So, like, a lot of people performed very well in the group stage. Then you go to the playoffs, and then you look at the stats, and you're like, okay, here's Mixwell. Guess what? 1.54 KD. Average combat score, 50 higher than Scream, 291. All right, God mode activated for Mixwell when the back's against the wall.
Exactly. It's a thing of he looked very pedestrian for the first few days of the tournament. He was one of the lowest ACS players out of everyone in the tournament. And then he kind of turned it on as the tournament went along, and he finally activated that God mode on Sunday. And the one thing we can say about G2, and the one thing we can never take away from them, is that when their backs are against the wall, when they are forced to win, when they are pushed to that limit, they will win. They have shown time and time again so far that they have another level that they can just flip on, and they've done that so many times so far in these IG tournaments. So G2 is obviously our number one. Maybe we'll do a hypothetical world power rankings in the coming weeks, coming months. That'll be fun because right now it's just G2 every week in the European power rankings at number one. But I think it's coming. I think this was a transitional tournament. I think this is the first chapter of a new season, really, in the European scene. FPX and TL are finally in the mix. I think we have BBL, Bonk, and a few other teams on the rise. I think we're going to have a lot more exciting European tournaments coming up, as long as the formats are better. If we get a FaZe Clan style tournament in Europe, it's going to go. It will be so good. It will be so good. So God willing, we get a good format next time. But yes, congratulations, G2, number 1 once again in our power ranking.
Never in doubt.
So let's go down, me and Arda. We got our top 5 down. Let's quickly go down our top 10 listings. For me, I had G2 number 1, Team Liquid number 2, 3 FBX, 4 NanIP, 5 Bunk, 6 Arda's Turkish Brethren, BBL Esports, 7 Spain's Giants Gaming, 8 The Opportunists from France, 9 Fishka v Tom, a CIS team, and number 10, maybe the thing that sums up the most of the European region right now as a whole, number 10, the Turkish squad looking for Orc.
So I almost had looking for Org at number 10 as well. And the only reason I didn't was because I looked at past tournament performance. And I don't want to put this team ever again in the top 10. And I agree with you. You've done this as well in previous EU top 10s. And I never want to see this team in the top 10 again because we know they're not an actual org, but they have previous placements and they have a lot of prize money to show for and a lot of players in other teams competing very well in Valorant. So my top 5 is similar to yours, except TL and FPX are switched. Number 6, BBL. Number 7, Vodafone Giants. Number 8, Need More DM. So the 8 and 9 I picked on past tournament results, and I feel like maybe head-to-head based on some of the players that did well in the Allied tournament that were like in that 6 to 10 range. I feel like maybe Need More DM and No Panky would give them a run for their money. And then number 10, Prodigy. I never want to see them there again. I want Looking for Org to be higher on this list, but I can't dismiss the fact that they have so much placement and prize money. But this has to be, please let this be the last time they're ever involved as a team.
And then for Jerome, he wants his team to drop out of the top 10, right? Because that means the best players are going to the best home. So he wants that 10. He never wants to see his team in the top 10 because that means good players are still under that. They're still orgless essentially. So good for Jerome from Prodigy going from the best team in Europe to number 10 in Arda's rankings. Let's go. Let's end the show as we usually do with the player of the week, where I select my player that impressed me the most during the weekend of Valorant action. Not primarily the player with the best stats or the one who had the highest average combat score, but the player that really impressed me the most or maybe stood out from the rest of the pack that you wouldn't necessarily think of. And Arda, please, if you want to give your own player of the week, do so as well. But for me, mine is, and it comes back to my love affair of Team Liquid, of me turning around the 180. And a lot of that had to do with their new primary operator player. And I cannot say, I cannot say, oh, I'm so flustered. I'm so happy to talk about this guy so much. He was so good during this tournament where I had so many doubts about Team Liquid with the operator room. Like, can't match up with Artists. They can't match up with Mixwell. They can't match up with Lucker. They can't match up with Shao in Shadow if they're playing on the right, right momentum. And it's like, I like Echoes a lot, but Link came in and he cleared all my doubts. He had so many amazing operator plays during the tournament. The one that most people remember is the 4K on Haven on C site where he flicks from one side to the next and he wins the round off a beautiful flick on the operator where the casters are just boggled in the mind of like, how could this possibly happen? And as you mentioned earlier, when you're reeling off the group stage stats, he had the highest KD of everyone in the group stage. And this is the type of, and I think in NA, this doesn't work, right? Where in NA, you need that aggressive operator play. You need the jet player. You need that player who's in the front lines, facing Wardell, facing Tens, facing Mame. But in Europe, I think when you have Scream on your team and you have a lot more rifle-based play, I think having a very safe Sage operator isn't a bad choice, especially on a team where you have Solkis and Reyna, who are not Scream. They're basically the same thing, Arda. Reyna and Scream, same dang thing. They're basically the same thing in my mind. When you have two such aggressive players, especially Scream, you want to have a bit of assurance in the backline. And I think that showed a lot where when there were those rounds where Scream did get cat out, or he did have one of his oopsie rounds where he's apologizing, saying, I went too hard on that one, Link was there to clean it up. And he was that Sage player where he wasn't the battle Sage primarily, where he's pushing through in the front lines, healing himself, playing for himself, but he was very trustworthy on that operator. And he wasn't dazzling at times when it compared to a Mixwell or Artist or Lucker, but he was really, really solid. And he wasn't dying a lot. He was getting a lot of kills, getting a lot of first blood kills. And for me, that really set apart what I thought of Team Liquid before and what I think of them now. And if you can add that assurance of a very responsible and mechanically gifted operator in the back lanes with a stage player like Link, I think that really opens up everything for Scream to go wild. And when you have Scream on your team, you want him to be that bulldog, taking those 50-50 aim duels, skating around on the arena, flashing in and out with her, invulnerability. That's when Team Liquid at me was at its best, when everything was rolling like that. So for me, Link, finally, Team Liquid seems to have their primary operator, and he's dang good on it. So congratulations to Link, my player of the week.
I love that. I love hearing people like just playing their positions such that other players can shine. I absolutely love that. And I know that stats aren't important to pick the player of the week. He did lead the tournament in KD with a 1.47. So good for Link. I will give a shout out to David P, the extraneous circumstances. I honestly, just to peek behind the curtain a little bit, even if G2 had lost this tournament, I think I still would have put, I mean, I think most people would have put G2 as number one in their rankings. But honestly, this was really a character win for them. The way that they were able to rally and the way that David P handled the situation. It's a very tough one, like you said, right? To lose a parent and to want to come back so soon after that, and G2 honoring the request and their teammates rallying around their this tragedy and just the outpouring of love and support that came from G2 fans, but also people in the organization and also the players. But this was a character win for this team, and David P really performed well under very, very difficult circumstances. So even if Link, shined so well in this tournament and is absolutely deserving of that honor, just a shout out to David P for playing the way he did, given the circumstances he was in.
Totally agree. Yeah, and hearts out to David P. Great guy, great player. Nothing else to be said. Our thoughts and wishes and condolences are with you. But fans out there, if you want to, vote, who is better, me and Arda? I know we have very similar lists, but who do you think is better, Team Liquid or FPX? It really comes down to that. Which team do you think is better? I think Team Liquid's better. He thinks for now FPX is better. We are going to have a Twitter poll out very soon after this broadcast ends. Please go vote for me. I want to continue my winning streak. I feel very good about myself winning week after week.
How many weeks are you in now? What's the winning streak at?
I have 2 wins. I'm 0-1 versus Arda. Arda beat me in the inaugural show. He beat me with the NA Power Rankings. But I feel confident that the Team Liquid fans will drive me above Arda in this ranking. And if you want to see more banter between me and Arda and Jacob Wolf and Emily Rain, all about the world of Valorant, we're going to have more news on Skadoodle and Nitro. Who's going to go to 100T? Let's talk about that. We have the upcoming tournament with the Pop Flash tournament, the Flashpoint Initial Series tournament in NA. We have so much to go to. Japan, Brazil, Thailand. There's so many Valorant tournaments coming around. And we're going to have all those news, highlights, and clips for you every Thursday night at 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Eastern. Please check us out on that. And Arda, plug some of your shows because you do a lot on this network. You are the host that does the most. Hosting's really hard. I've learned this the past 2 months doing the show, but you do a lot of hosting on our ESPN Esports channel. Please plug some of your stuff.
Yeah, we got lots of shows. I mean, on Mondays, we now have the ESPN Esports Rocket League show called Behind the Wheel. That's at 3 p.m. Eastern. It's great. Very much enjoying that. Our Call of Duty League show will resume next week on Wednesdays as we get into the playoffs in Call of Duty League. You mentioned the Valorant show, Coach's Corners on Wednesdays. That's moving from Mondays to Wednesdays at 1 p.m. Eastern. And, of course, Emily has the LPL Corner on Fridays. We have a whole slate on Twitch. I mean, it's crazy to think how much we have created in the last 6 months in terms of just shows and content. And we keep rolling. And obviously we have VODs available on our YouTube channel as well. We are cruising, my friend.
And if League of Legends World Championships coming, oh boy. I mean, 24/7, 24/7. We might have every single day. We are going to have something new for you guys. So be ready for our Worlds coverage.
Hey, Tyler, what's the song? What's the song, Tyler?
I can't leak it. What song? What song? There's no song. I don't know any song.
What song?
Yeah. If you guys love this show, if you enjoyed what me and Arda brought, please give us a follow and bring us up to that 100,000 mark. We are getting very close to that. And if you want to follow us even closer, check us out at espn.com/esports. Chat, viewers, podcast listeners, sometimes in life, people are going to rank you 20th. Sometimes in life, they're going to rank you 4th. But in my heart alone, you will always be number 1. And I will see you here next Monday for the ESPN Valorant Power Ranking Show. Good night.